To win fantasy football championships, you have to be dominant on the waiver wire. So we've got some guys that you should be picking up and adding to your fantasy football teams if you have the roster spots to play in deeper leagues. It's going to depend on league format. Let's talk about our first guy here. It's going to be Ricky Pearsall and Juwan Jennings, both of these guys actually.
Both of them.
And I think the explanation for this is obvious. The season-ending injury, or what we presume to be a season-ending injury for Brandon Ayuk, I'm sure it will be confirmed at some point tomorrow or / today when this comes out. This is obviously a huge blow to the 49ers. And on top of this, situationally with the 49ers, you're always going to have a team that, yes, they did pass the ball less than almost every other team in the NFL last year, but they are always going to have fantasy productive guys just because it is a Shanahan offense and because this is a playoff contending team. And so with Deebo Samuel has already missed a game this season, and then he also just didn't play this game because he was sick. And so the thing about Deebo, though, is Deebo pretty much over his career has had stretches where he has missed games. Really what you're looking at is Juwan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall. They're a Kittle injury, which also happens, he plays through his injuries a lot, or a Deebo injury from being 8+ targets a game options right now.
Yeah.
Like you really are that close. And so I think Juwan Jennings goes back to being really, really valuable. Obviously you saw him earlier in the season produce with other guys on the field. And then, he's been disappointing in the last couple of weeks, but 5 points against Seattle, 2 points against Arizona. But again, he had that 46-point game. He had an 11-point game to follow that up. He's not going to have 46 points every week, but 12 targets in week 3 when you had Deebo Samuel out. And again, 5 to 6 targets every other game. I think he's probably going to be the biggest benefactor from this. He's still the wide receiver 16 on the season. That's freaking crazy. I would personally put him as 1 and Pearsall as 2 in terms of wide receivers in the San Francisco offense. Juwan Jennings has proven that he has Brock Purdy's trust, and I think because we've seen him produce already this season in that offense, I think that's going to make him 1 for me. Ricky Pearsall obviously made his NFL debut against Kansas City. He did have 5 targets, had 3 receptions for 21 yards. With Ricky, I don't feel like Ricky Pearsall is going to be a high volume guy. I didn't think this coming into the NFL. I didn't think coming out of college that he was going to be a high target guy in the NFL. If you watch him in college, he is a very big highlight play guy. And it's nothing against Pearsall, but he really is going to fit more of the Ayuk role in that offense. And if you've been keeping track, the Ayuk role hasn't really been productive for fantasy football this year. While with Juwan Jennings, I think Juwan Jennings is a little bit more versatile, and I think you're going to see Juwan Jennings get a wider variety of the type of targets that are going to be thrown around in the San Francisco 49ers offense. And so with Juwan, I think he does become a guy that's going to be flexible every week. He's the wide receiver 2. I think he's probably the third option there, the wide receiver 2 in San Francisco. Maybe it changes when Christian McCaffrey comes back. Maybe Juwan Jennings isn't going to be near as flexible as he is right now. But I do expect his snap percentage, while it's hovered in the 50s almost every single game besides week 3 when Deebo was out, I do expect that to go up. I think when you're looking at the usage from this week's game for San Francisco, looking at the snap counts, Ricky Pearsall had 48 snaps. Chris Conley was second with 44 snaps. Brandon Ayuk, 25 snaps, and Ronnie Bell with 24 snaps as well.
Well, I wanted to mention, if you don't have a waiver budget left, if you spent all of your fab at this point, which honestly probably a lot of you have, it's week 7 now, and waivers are getting really, really tough to navigate because there's just not that many guys, not that many hidden gems anymore. If you don't have any waiver dollars left and you can't afford a guy like Ricky Pearsall or Juwan Jennings, if you've got a roster spot, if you have the flexibility, go ahead and pick up a guy like Conley, Ronnie Bell, or Jacob Cowing, because none of them are going to cost you anything. You're just going to have to drop a guy. So keep that in mind. Those will be obviously our next 3 options because they're the next 3 men up, and Cowing actually showcased a little bit of ability today in the receiving game. Yeah, he did.
And obviously, again, a void left by Brandon Ayuk is the reason that we're going to be going and trying to target whoever could break out in that San Francisco offense with Ayuk probably missing the rest of the season.
Yep. And Ray Davis will be our next guy here. I think it's worth talking about him because obviously he's coming off of that really good game against the Jets on Monday night, but James Cook was out. So we knew that Ray Davis was probably going to be, a 1-week Band-Aid. If you own James Cook and you're able to get Ray Davis off waivers, plug him in. He was productive. That's great. Cook is going to come back. He's going to take away from Davis's production. That actually wasn't necessarily the case. And I know James Cook is still banged up, but they did split goal line carries. They only had 2 the entire game, but Cook had 1, and Ty Johnson actually had the other, which is funny. But early down usage, James Cook again had the majority. Ray Davis was the next guy. Total plays, Ray Davis was the next guy, short yardage. It was a split. Third downs, Ty Johnson, which again expected, but you're looking at the production there, and I think this is worth noting that Ray Davis did get a decent amount of opportunity despite there being a number of backs there that were getting usage, and he as honestly just earns this opportunity. He had 5 total carries on the day compared to James Cook's 12, which again, not that much of a difference when you're just looking at James Cook's usage before the injury. I think Ray Davis has demonstrated that he is worth putting on the field in a game, even at the expense of James Cook's potential production upside. 5 carries for 41 yards, 8.2 yards per carry, and he was able to get a touchdown as well. Also got a reception for 6 points. That's another, again, 1 or 2 points. So you're looking at the rest of the season. Is Ray Davis going to be a consistent flex option that you're going to want to plug in every single week? No, not while James Cook is healthy, not while James Cook is playing. But if you ever see a week where James Cook is struggling, where James Cook is not being efficient like he was against Tennessee, 2.6 yards per carry with 12 opportunities, Ray Davis was just more explosive, they're going to plug him in there, and then we're going to start having conversations and start worrying. And I think it's worth holding on to Ray Davis for the next few weeks to see if he can build off of these performances and maybe eat into James Cook's workload even more.
It is interesting. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if there are James Cook owners right now having PTSD with the red zone carries and then other running backs scoring those touchdowns.
Yeah.
And with James
Not
Cook,
to mention Josh Allen.
The main, you've got Josh Allen there, but the main thing, with James Cook and the appeal with him on top of being a really skilled back was that he's actually getting red zone carries, and seeing other running backs score, I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
We've spent a lot of time in the last couple of days doing team blueprints for people. This is where we are breaking down your team, telling you which positions that you need to make moves at in order to win your fantasy football leagues. A lot of teams are very stacked at a certain position, but we're like, hey, go target these buy low guys at this position so that you can win your fantasy football league. We can do that specifically for your team. Nathan and I do all of these personally at flockfantasy.com/domain. Link is in the pinned comment in the description. You get a free one with the annual Mother Flocker tier, but you can also buy a team blueprint for your fantasy team wherever you are. And so we'd love to do one for you. Like I said, link's going to be in the pinned comment, but let's get back to it. Let's talk about Cedric Tillman. This is a conversation that needs to be had. And I think a lot of people write this off as like, yeah, Cedric Tillman's not even worth a look. And I disagree, because when you're looking at the usage today for the Cleveland Browns, basically with Cedric Tillman, if you watch our Dynasty channel, you'll remember we talked pretty highly of Cedric Tillman coming out of the draft, in particular against Jalen Hyatt, who we thought actually the best receiver from Tennessee was Cedric Tillman. Cedric Tillman,
and we definitely overshot
just a little bit. However,
quite a bit.
However, Cedric Tillman, when you're looking at last year, from week 12 on, he actually did have a fair amount of targets: 5 targets, 6 targets, 8 targets, 6 targets, all again in the last 6 weeks of the season. And when you're looking at what he did today, coming into this week, he hadn't played more than 33% of snaps, and he hadn't gotten more than 2 targets in a game. It was pretty clear once they traded Amari Cooper. A lot of outlets were reporting that Cedric Tillman would become a starter, and you basically saw that happen. The leading receiver on the Cleveland Browns today, in terms of opportunity, in terms of snap share, I should say, was Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy played 8% of snaps. He ran 56 routes, and he had 6 targets. However, the leading receiver in terms of targets and in terms of fantasy production today was Cedric Tillman. You had Cedric Tillman come in, play 69 snaps, nice, and he ran 47 routes, had 11 targets. He had 5 more targets today than Jerry Jeudy. And the main thing here is Tillman was on the field for 11 personnel. He was on the field for 12 personnel. He made himself look like a clear starter, and he got targeted today more than any other receiving option. That's not insignificant, because you're talking about a football team that is now going to go through a dramatic shift in how they're going to look the rest of the season. They just lost to Deshaun Watson for the entire season. Whether or not they're better or worse because of that, I won't say, but you probably know. And you're going to see different players get targets. So you have Amari Cooper leaving that offense and Deshaun Watson leaving that offense. You have Nick Chubb returning to that offense. This is a different football team. And in terms of the parity that comes along with who's going to be getting the targets, I think it's way up in the air. But I think what you saw is that the Browns, the coaching staff, as an organization, they're committed to Cedric Tillman as a starting wide receiver. That he ran more routes than Elijah Moore, Darden, Thrash, all of those guys. And honestly, frankly, I think he's probably a better wide receiver than Elijah Moore and Darden and Thrash. Like, he probably is the second best wide receiver on this team now, behind Jerry Jeudy from a talent perspective. And so when you see the talent finally get the opportunity, and he gets the volume to go with it, with a brand new quarterback, with less wide receiver competition, with a running back coming back that could help energize the offense, with a team that's going to look drastically different throughout the season, like, I don't think you can just dismiss this as a fluke. And sure, will Cedric Tillman have 3 targets next week? Maybe. Maybe he will. That's what happens when you're talking about an offense that really has been quite poor in the NFL this year. However, when we're talking about waivers, we're also speaking to people that play in deep leagues where waivers are completely depleted. And Cedric Tillman is rostered in 1% of leagues right now. He's available in every single one of your fantasy football leagues. And so if you can get him, again, not spending a ton of money on him at all, but like if you have the roster spot, if you have a revolving door roster spot, which I would say 75% of teams do, fantasy teams. Not every fantasy team has starters all the way down their bench. Like that's pretty rare. He might be somebody you plug in the revolving door starter spot. So roster spot. So again, with Tillman, I'm not going to project that he's going to be significantly productive the rest of the season, but I will say the impact that we saw on the field today was worth noting, and I do think he is worth at least looking at for a roster spot in your fantasy football leagues.
Yeah, I think Trey Tucker is worth a look as well. He's had a couple weeks already this season where he's had 19, 12 points, 9, 6, 5 targets. He had another 8-target day against the Rams. And no, he wasn't ultra productive against the Rams this week, but the volume was there, and the volume has been there even when guys like Jacoby Myers and Devontae Adams were on the field alongside Brock Bowers. I mean, when they were at full strength, the Raiders, to begin the season, Trey Tucker was still having some decent games with some decent opportunities. So I would definitely keep in mind that Jacoby Myers obviously is going to come back healthy, and that Trey Tucker is probably going to go back to the role that he was originally intended to be in when they were constructing this offense to begin with, obviously with the exception of Devontae Adams, which is a big change, but the volume is going to be there. And am I really that worried about DJ Turner being the lead snap guy? Actually, they tied for snaps. Turner and Tucker and DJ Turner had one more route, same amount of targets. I'm not worried about DJ Turner because I don't think he's actually going to be that second or third wide receiver option there. It's going to be Trey Tucker. DJ Turner really in this game against the Rams was playing like the schematic replacement role. He is like Jacoby Myers' true backup, so he was playing that schematic role on the offense. So once Jacoby Myers is back into the offense, it's going to be Myers as the number one guy, Bowers / number one guy, Myers and Bowers, and then you've got Trey Tucker. When Trey Tucker is the third option in that offense in the receiving game, that really bodes well for his production because obviously the biggest concern is going to be the best players on the field. Jacoby Myers is a very competent, more than competent. He's a very good NFL wide receiver. I would say above average. And
Absolutely.
Brock Bowers is phenomenal. He's becoming a significant problem for defenses overall. And you're not going to be able to allow him to just get these easy 5 to 7 yard dump offs and add 10 yards after the catch. So what's that going to do? I think it's going to create more opportunity for Trey Tucker. And honestly, I know so many of you guys hate Gardner Minshew. We don't love Gardner Minshew. He is very, very limited, but honestly, I prefer Minshew in this offense from a passing game volume perspective than I do Aiden O'Connell. I think he's going to provide more volume for all of these guys in the receiving game, and Trey Tucker is going to be a main beneficiary of that situation there. O'Connell, I think they feared that he broke his thumb, so he'll be out for a significant amount of time. They won't even be tempted to put anyone else in the roster or at the quarterback position there. So keep an eye on Tucker. The volume will definitely be there over the next couple of weeks. I think he's a curious guy that if you're desperate, struggling with injuries, or have buys coming up in the next couple of weeks, you may need to flex him.
Let's talk about Keon, because I honestly didn't speak very highly of Keon on this channel after the first couple of weeks. As you know, I own him in the Flock League, and so obviously my most important league, the league I really want to win in.
Well, let me just say, in your defense, I think what you said about Keon Coleman was very much legitimate. We did not forecast an Amari Cooper trade. And honestly, the only reason that happened is because the Jets traded for Devontae Adams, let's be honest. But once they did that, and I'll let you take this on, I didn't want to interrupt you, but like you were right about Keon Coleman previously.
Yeah.
His situation has been flipped upside down.
It has, and we need to talk about that because a couple of things are happening here. And I didn't say Keon Coleman was going to be irrelevant the rest of the season, and I didn't go overboard with my Keon Coleman analysis because I still have Keon Coleman on my roster in that league, and there was a reason I held him. I honestly had an opportunity to sell him last week, essentially for free agent dollars, because he was looking droppable after a couple of weeks ago.
A lot of people did,
and a lot of people dropped him because he's only rostered in 52% of your sleeper leagues right now. And he's a guy that you should go spend a waiver pickup on because the situation is different now, and we need to talk about that. Obviously, in the first couple of weeks, 5 targets, 1 targets, 1 targets, 4 targets. Like you weren't after 4 weeks, you were like, oh my gosh. And then he had 12 points, but only on 5 targets, and then 4 targets. But then he came out versus Tennessee, which keep in mind, I think was the number one defense in terms of fantasy wide receivers coming into this week. I'm pretty sure they were number one or number 2. And Keon Coleman actually had 16.5 points today. But the main thing is Keon Coleman had 7 targets, which is a season high. He tied his season high in receptions with 4. He shattered his season high of yards in 125, and you saw him get a bunch of yak. And I would probably be going out and saying, okay, this if this had happened without the Amari Cooper trade and without some of the plays that I saw, I'd probably be saying, okay, this is, he got a couple of big plays. This is what Keon Coleman is. This type of receiver he is. He got some big plays. He got some yak. You're going to have boom leaks like this. But the 7 targets is significant. The reason that Keon Coleman is open now, and this is, I feel like if you watched his tape, which we did right before we recorded this video, we turned on his tape when we watched it, is because you've got Dalton Kincaid, occasionally Dawson Knox, and you have Amari Cooper, and you have Khalil Shakir all sucking defenses into the middle of the field. Keon Coleman is going to get more looks downfield now than he was getting. And I don't think that Keon Coleman's going to get 7 targets every week. I don't think he's going to score 16.5 points every week. But I do think he's going to start getting more opportunity, and you're going to see a higher frequency of big plays from Keon Coleman. I think that's going to make him rosterable in your fantasy football leagues at the very minimum, let alone maybe getting towards flexible. Mm-hmm. You saw 3 guys produce in this offense this week. Again, against a really tough Tennessee defense. But Shakir had 7 targets. Amari Cooper had a touchdown. And then Keon Coleman had 7 targets. And Keon's naturally going to catch less targets than those other guys. But as you can see, he's going to get more yards than those other guys. The other thing I saw from Keon, which was interesting today, was if you watched the game, you saw that Keon actually had a play where he was the hot route. And they ran a quick slant with him, and Allen threw him the ball, and he got a bunch of yak on it. And that's less significant to me because, yeah, he got a bunch of yak and ended up being like a play that scored 4 or 5 points in your fantasy leagues. It's more important to me because now, like, I saw the Bills actually draw up a play for him.
You're seeing versatility rather than just big playability on the outside.
Whereas
he's getting lucky and open down the field.
I think through the first couple of weeks, I don't think the Bills were necessarily. I think in week 1 people maybe saw it a little bit, but I don't think the Bills were necessarily interested in making him a priority in terms of actually like utilizing his playmaking skills. Mm-hmm. And what I mean, even that play, I'm like, okay, they actually just drew up a play for Keon.
Well, they can do it now too. And I think that's what good alpha wide receivers do to an offense, and that's what Amari Cooper is going to do for the Bills.
So again, the versatility of the offense as a whole is going to increase now. With Keon, he is obviously a great talent. He's only 21 years old. And the other thing with Keon is he's just going to get better as he goes on in his rookie season. That's true with every rookie wide receiver, right? Marv's going to get better. BTJ is going to continue to get better. It's hard to believe, I know. But these guys are going to continue to get better as their season goes on. And so with Keon, it's a number of things. But the addition of Amari Cooper, I mean, I think a lot of people thought, well, Keon Coleman's dead now. And actually, schematically, it makes a lot of sense for Keon. It really does. And I think you saw that today. It is worth noting that the Titans were missing their top 2 cornerbacks for this matchup. They were both out. And so that could have had something to do with it. But it doesn't change the fact that Keon Coleman was being targeted, right? And so that's the main thing. I think he's worth a roster spot. I think you should pick him up in your fantasy leagues if he's available. Yeah.
I think Zack Herz is another nice streamable tight end that you can pick up. I mean, at this point, it's just anyone's guess who's going to produce at the tight end position when you're fading tight end and you're just picking up guys on a weekly basis. Zack Herz is a guy that you can depend on getting very consistent volume. Again, it's not going to be a ton, but every single week he gets like 5 targets and he hauls in a majority of them. And saw him get his first touchdown this year against Carolina. Granted, it was against Carolina, but he had a nice 12-point game in half PPR formats. And with Zack Ertz, he is without question the number 1 tight end option there, and no one else is taking away from that. Like Ben Sinnott got a ton of garbage time usage at the end of the game because that game was over before it even started. They didn't even need Jaden Daniels to dominate that game because the Panthers are legitimately like one of the worst teams I've probably ever seen, the 2024 Carolina Panthers. And with Zack Ertz, he is going to be pretty consistent and have a nice solid floor for you. He's going to consistently get his own while he's on the field, whether or not Jaden Daniels is on the field. And I think you saw that today. Obviously, he got another 5 targets with Marcus Mariota, who looks solid. I wouldn't be shocked if Jaden Daniels misses a couple of weeks. He obviously was all smiles during the game. They maybe just took him out of the game in totality because they were like, this game isn't even worth you being in, and they were just playing it safe. He probably just has like bruised ribs or whatever. They haven't announced it yet. I'm sure it'll come out once this video comes out. But with Jaden Daniels, Marcus Mariota, whoever's playing for the next couple of weeks, I think Zack Ertz is a great option for you to just plug in your tight end spot. You know the amount of volume that he's going to get, and you know that he could potentially have some touchdown upside as well because he just showed that this last week.
Yeah. And then our last guy we're going to talk about here is Pierre Strong. And Pierre Strong is probably going to be somebody that, again, it's going to be really deep league because he wasn't productive today. He had 2.5 points. He had 3 carries, and he had 3 targets. But that running back room for Cleveland is a little bit interesting in the sense that you did see Pierre Strong get 42 snaps to Nick Chubb's 30 today. And so when you're looking at the running back usage, in terms of all plays, it was Pierre Strong. In terms of early downs, it was Pierre Strong and Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb did get the goal line carries. The 2-minute drill was Pierre Strong. Third downs, it was Pierre Strong. So you do wonder, does Pierre Strong have some receiving upside in that offense? He really didn't play weeks 3 through 4. 3, 4, and 5, my bad. And then he came back in week 6, played 50% of snaps, and had 9.5 points last week. Again, wasn't productive today, but he did play over D'Onta Foreman. And that's what's significant to us, I think, is that D'Onta Foreman was kind of presumed to be the number 2 back in Cleveland. And in fact, with Pierre Strong on the field, it looks like he's actually earned that job. Yep. So I think he's worth a look. Again, I wouldn't spend any money on him probably. I wouldn't spend any of your fab budget. I probably would only be adding him in deeper leagues. But he is somebody that I think is worth looking at, especially if Chubb has any setbacks to his injuries at all. Pierre Strong would immediately become, in my opinion, close to flexible in fantasy football leagues if he does indeed take it from D'Onta Foreman and if Jerome Ford does remain to be out. What's the injury update on Jerome Ford?
Hamstring. I haven't heard any timetable on it.
Yeah, so
we'll see. I hate
that.
Hamstring injuries for running backs.
I do too, and so that's part of the reason why he's on this video. So again, that's a really deep league one. But there you go. Some guys you can add to your fantasy football team. Again, you got to dominate waivers, but make sure you drop a like. Make sure you're subscribed to play fantasy football. We appreciate you guys watching. We'll see you later.